And I don't know how long I've carried on here. It's probably running too long already. Let's see if I can think of some more. The old tales they would tell. The Cherokee Indian loved to tell stories. And again, I guess it's the only entertainment they had. I guess they did some singing or whatever, but storytelling. And this too came along with my grandmother and my mother. And for some reason, they loved to tell old, we called them haint tales. That's a good word. It comes from haunting. Anything is haunted, and the thing that's doing a haunting was called a haint. At least that's what we called in my younger days. There's a haint tales. And they would tell some of the awfulest old stories about things like that. Usually they tell them, we would have dark houses and like some of these old kerosene lamps where, if you can imagine, being dimly lit, sitting around without a whole lot of, no outside lights anywhere, no street lights, nothing else, out in the country in the dark, sitting around a kerosene lamp talking about haints, how scary it was to a kid. And I remember one of the story always came around. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it's worldwide. It's always told. But they would sit around and talk about these things that they were sitting in at the dinner table one night. All of them were around the table, and they heard it dark outside, and they heard a rumbling at the front door and a rumbling on the front porch, and the front door swung open, and in rolled a casket on wheels and rolled right up beside the dinner table. Things like that, and that would scare kids very badly. I remember the mother telling, and again, it's probably some of my grandmother's beliefs passed on to the children. I remember telling things about, they woke up one night, her father would walk. If you can imagine this, it's a long way from northeastern Alabama down around where they used to live in Powder Springs, Georgia, but he would walk down there and stay however length of time and walk back. Never knew my grandfather on my mother's side of the family ever drive a car his whole life long. My grandmother either. They never drove a car, and evidently didn't have horses. So he walked. When he wanted to go somewhere, he walked. He was still doing that. He lived to be 93. He would still walk everywhere he wanted to go. But anyway, he had gone off down into Georgia, left them all, those 8 kids and her mother there by themselves out in the country, way out in the country. And I think my mother said it happened to her. It might have been one of her sisters, but the story was that she woke up one night and her father was standing at the end of the bed and spoke to her. And she said, in her mind, said, well, Papa, they call him Papa, Papa's made it back home. Got up this morning, Papa wasn't there. That she had seen a vision, a ghost, an image, whatever, a premonition of her father being home. Not too long after they got the next morning and realized that Papa wasn't there, Papa came home. And they took it as, the sign from the night before that he was coming home. And sure enough, he did. I remember telling that one. Another one I remember, and this one scared me terribly. Back in those days, the old houses were built up off the ground. They would stack up rocks for footing several places around the old house and build a house to get it up off the damp ground, sometimes several feet off the ground, and sometimes on a sloping ground where it was high. You could almost walk under the porch and on one end where the ground sloped away. So there was room back under the porch, back in the house. The story was that they were all around the table one time and noticed one of the youngest boys was hiding food off the table. He would eat some of it, but he'd take some of it and put it in his pocket. They kind of noticed what he was doing. Again, it's just a story. And they decided they would follow him outside. And this is one of the stories that scared me as a child. And I always wondered if it was true or not knowing. But they followed him outside. And he didn't know they were following him out. So they followed him out, and he would go back where he could see back under the floor, back under the porch. And he would take a biscuit or a piece of meat or a bone or whatever he brought out, and he would toss it back. He was throwing it back in the house. And they said they got to looking back in the house, and there was kind of a hollowed out place they couldn't see into, and then kind of a little ridge around that hollowed out place. And he was taking this food and throwing it up on top of that little rise. And said they were watching, and said he threw chicken bone or whatever back up on top of the other ridge, and so this big hairy hand came up, reached over there and grabbed it and pulled it back in. I'm sure that was told to keep kids from running under the house a lot and getting hurt, but that horrified me. I never liked to go up under the house after I heard that one as a kid. But they'd tell those old things and just scare you to death.